Hi, everybody. My name is Rabbi Ari Goldstein, and you probably can see, well, you can't see. Now you can see to my, I guess, right. It looks like left on my computer, but right on the screen, this is Anna Greenberg. And this is the first of what I hope to be a series of interviews that I will do with members of our congregation to hear their Jewish stories. And I could not think of a more perfect person to speak with first about Jewish journeys than Anna Greenberg, because no one has more of a history in our community that I can think of than Anna, and her Jewish experience and her Jewish story is quite rich. And so, Anna, I'm just going to ask you some questions, and it's just going to be a way to just to kind of hear what your story is. So, tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what it was, where you grew up, and what it was like to be a Jew when you grew up as a kid.
Well, I was born in Annapolis at the Annapolis Emergency Hospital in room 305 in May 13th, 1929. Okay, I'll be 92 in 2 weeks. All right. And my parents moved to Annapolis from Baltimore in 1926. And my father moved here because of economic opportunity. And he came here to buy a butcher shop in the Black neighborhood. And across the street, catty corner to the butcher shop, was this theater for Blacks only. And Daddy said, I'd rather own a theater than a butcher shop. So he bought the theater. And he was very successful, even though it was the beginning of the Depression. When I was born, people still wanted to be entertained. So they came to the theater. And many times he would give them credit. They would pay for their children, and they going to the movies at the end of the month. And most of the Blacks in Annapolis worked either for the Naval Academy or domestically. And so they weren't as needy of money as other people in the Depression. And also talking movies came out. And Joe Louis Black was a champion boxer. And all these things added to the attraction of coming to the movies. So my father did well, and thank God. And I have my mother and father. My mother was in business with my father. I have them to thank for an awful lot,
Yeah,
so much. And
so
my father was very religious.
Say that. Well, I'm sorry. Say that last part again.
My father was very religious. We were Shomer Shabbos.
Really?
Yes.
What was it like to be Shomer Shabbos
our
in
maid
Annapolis?
Was the Shabbos Goy. She went around to the Jewish houses and opened their mail for them on Saturdays.
Well,
which is, I think it's sinful, but that's the way we did things.
Right. I don't love it either, but I get it. So how many Orthodox families were there in Annapolis?
There was only one shul, one synagogue, and it was Orthodox. How many of us kept kosher and observed the Shabbat and all? Well, I'm going to say there were maybe 75 Jewish families when I was growing up in Annapolis. Kept Shabbat and all.
10.
A few.
Right.
A few.
And was the butcher shop that your family was opened originally, was it a kosher butcher shop, I presume?
No. That one was downtown. That belonged to a man named Mr. Sadinsky. And he had the butcher shop down on the market space where right now, if you went downtown, I think it would be the Dockside Cafe where you go for a cup of coffee. That was Sadinsky's.
It must be fun.
Most of the Jewish merchants were in that area and up Main Street.
Right. I remember hearing about, I guess it was the Bermans that had one or two things on that street.
The Bermans had, the Klawans had, the Jacobs had. For Rosh Hashanah, most of the shops were closed. For Yom Kippur, they were closed.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
It must be really fun or interesting or nostalgic every time you walk into downtown Annapolis. and you kind of imagine what things were like,
Hmm.
how different they are
Well,
now.
the historic Annapolis has taught me that the main streets, the dock area, that almost every shop there was either owned or rented by Jews.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. So KI, but the building,
That's going back to, excuse me, that's going back to colonial times.
what?
Colonial times.
Really?
Well, let's say in the late in the 80s and into the 90s, most of the stores in downtown Annapolis were rented or owned by Jews.
Wow. I did not realize how significant the Jewish popular community was that early. What,
I can vaguely, Ari, you have to come louder.
oh, that's okay. I didn't realize
Yeah.
how significant the Jewish community was that early on.
Yes.
But so tell like so and KI was not located in the building that we know of KI now. Where was KI
No,
before?
the first, well, they used to meet in the Cotson's home, above their store in the dockside area. Um, and the Cotson's house would be on the corner of Cornhill and the dock area, and it was above their store, uh, where the Federal House now is.
Oh wow.
Okay,
And you had a
yeah,
Torah and everything there, huh? You
I,
remember
I
having
didn't
a
hear
Torah?
that. I'm not sure if they had a Torah, but I would think that they would have one. I would think they would. Yeah,
Probably, right.
but the first building that they bought to make a synagogue
Yeah.
was on Duke of Gloucester Street.
Uh-huh.
I forgot the number, but when I did the 100th anniversary of Knesset Israel Synagogue, I was in charge of a year's of events, and we went and dedicated. It was, if I'm going down Duke of Gloucester Street, you come to a traffic light, and that's Conduit Street. If you look to your right, the house just before the corner, the next to the last house on the right-hand side, there's
Yeah.
a plaque there. It was the first home of Knesset Israel. I had that, I had that, I had that plaque made and dedicated. It's right under the windowsill. You can see it if you
I
drive
will
very
take a look for it
carefully.
next time. Yeah.
And I had the gentleman with the longest standing uh, continuation residence in Annapolis, Herbie Kotzen. I had him put the plaque up,
Huh.
and that was 1906. And then they moved from that house to another house on Prince George Street, which was near the. Then they finally, I think it was 1919, they finally bought the Mission Chapel for St. Anne's Church, which is a building that looks like a church or a synagogue on the corner of East Street and Prince George Street.
Yeah,
It's now two condominiums.
yeah. Wow.
We sold it. We sold it in 2000. Wait a minute. We sold it in 2061. Yeah, 2061 or 62. I was living in Japan at that time. I wasn't
1962.
here. 62. And then
19,
they
not
moved.
2062.
No, 1962.
Right.
I'm sorry.
2062 would
19.
be a
Yeah,
little
I was
hard.
getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry. Yeah.
If you can sell it in
1962.
2062, that you are going
There
to
was, there
become
was,
quite a historical figure, I think.
yeah, you're right.
So do you remember Hebrew school at Knesset Israel as a kid?
Oh my God, yes, I went for 7 years to Cheder.
What was
After
it like?
school, I went to Cheder. Um, if you'll look down Duke of Gloucester Street and you go down, um, you're going down Duke of Gloucester past where the first shul was, um, and you go to just past the city hall, just past there's Green Street and the elementary school. It was called the Annapolis Grammar School. I went to school there for 7 years, first through seventh grade.
At the
During the
Annapolis Grammar School.
That was the Annapolis Grammar School, which is now the Annapolis Elementary School.
Got it.
Now, during the Depression, all of Anne Arundel County schools eliminated the 8th grade during the Depression. So I went to school first to 7th grade there in the Annapolis Grammar School.
Hmm.
And then I walked from the grammar school down Green Street to the end in the market space area, then through an alleyway to Prince George Street, and there was the synagogue. And I went to Cheder in the not in the sanctuary, but in the sanctuary was on the second floor, on the first, the vestry room,
And
and our rabbi taught me for 7 years.
what was the rabbi's name? You remember?
Eliezer Cohen.
Wow. And so what did he teach? Hebrew, or did he teach like
Hebrew.
Hebrew?
Hebrew. Taught us prayers.
Did
He
you
taught
learn
us
any?
prayers.
Did you ever learn
He
any
gave us
like?
the alphabet. We had to learn the alphabet, and then certain prayers at certain times.
Did you?
And I was the only girl.
Did you ever
They
learn
were all boys.
any like Jewish history or Bible or anything like that?
No. But when I got to be 15, the Jewish Welfare Board sent a gentleman named Lipschutz, that I don't remember his first name, but he was a young man, and he came to teach us for confirmation. There weren't bat mitzvahs; there were only bar mitzvahs, and he taught me a little bit about the Jewish history. And when there were holidays, of course they taught us about the holidays, but not how to translate or anything like that. It was very orthodox.
The purpose was to teach you Hebrew and the prayers.
Yes. Oh, yes.
That was its goal.
To teach us how to daven.
Right. Oh my word.
Yeah.
Do you remember and so obviously then for sure this KI was what there was a mechitza and a women's section and a men's section, correct?
Absolutely.
And I mean, I guess you just said this is the way it is, but did anyone ever talk about Orthodoxy and Annapolis and whether it was, and whether KI needed to separate men and women, or was that just always a given that was?
It was a given. It was a given.
Right.
Absolutely.
No one discussed it.
Then there was no mechitza. Everyone knew which row. There was a certain row that no woman went before that. And there was one family, the Lippman family, they wanted to sit together. So we made an exception for them because Mr. Lippman was president of the congregation. And so his family wanted to sit with him. Otherwise,
So wait a minute. Did he sit with his wife, or did his wife come and
Yes.
sit with him?
His wife came to sit with him.
Wow. That's big. That's huge.
And the synagogue was not Ashkenazi. The synagogue was Sephardi. Our prayers were not, but I'm presuming that when they took over it was a mission chapel for St. Anne's before we bought it, and the Torah reading and all was in the center in a circular where they davened from.
Oh, so you're saying that the sanctuary had the Sephardic feel of a center location
Yes.
with people around
It was
it.
designed Sephardic, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's fascinating. And so when you, as you got older, when you were in your high school years, did you have still a connection with KI, or were you once you were,
All the time.
all the
All
time?
the time. I went off to college. I kept kosher. I remember when I got married, the first place we moved to in New Jersey, I bought a loaf of white bread and a pound of bacon, just
Because
to
you were
show
allowed,
I
because
was
you were on
free.
your own.
Yeah.
And then you realized I can't do this. This isn't.
Yeah. Well, I kept wherever we moved, and I've lived many places. Wherever we moved, I joined a congregation,
Right.
mainly Reform, because that was our way of life then.
Right, because so often what happens is that, and I not can only imagine, I know specifically in your case, is that you have a connection with KI because of a historical connection with that location, but it's not necessarily who you are or your style, but you can't deny your historical connection with the location.
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. That was where I was born into. I was named there. I buried my mother and father and daughter out of Knesset, Israel. I was married there. I confirmed everything was Knesset, Israel in my upbringing.
Not to
And
mention,
throughout my life, I'm still a member of Knesset, Israel. I don't participate, although once in a while, especially especially for yurt sites,
Yeah.
especially for um, what, I'm losing the word. Um, I say Kaddish there.
Right. Well, yard sites. You
Yeah,
said it correct.
yeah,
Yard sites.
yeah,
The, I mean, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, and add onto it, even if it's all these memories, it still is what your parents connected with and what was important to
yes,
them. And so so that it matters to you simply because it was important to them, that it becomes important to you, and for good reason.
exactly.
And
Thank you
so,
for saying it that nicely.
yeah, no, I feel so often the same way. It's like,
Okay, I'm not
when you think about it,
apologizing.
when you think about it, isn't that so much of Judaism altogether? Which is, I mean, it's not like we, do the priestly sacrifices anymore, like
Yeah,
we did in the Bible. But and so why is it that we read about it in the Torah? Well, just because that's what our ancestors did, and so we care about it because that's what they did. Whether we do it or not anymore is irrelevant. What matters is
when
they
I
did it,
attend
and we care
services,
about it.
and you talk about the holidays, my memory flashes back to when I was in Cheder and Rabbi Cohen or Rabbi Rosenblatt. They would be telling me the same story, and I love the way your angle. You question whether the story was that way, but I was taught that was it.
Right, that's it. But
Okay.
still, doesn't whether I question it or not. What matters is that it still is our story, and that is
Yes.
what matters. Knesset Israel, whether you agree or disagree, it still is the synagogue that your parents loved, that you grew up in, and so it makes it your
Yeah.
synagogue. And so, no, there's no doubt about it. It makes perfect sense to me. Let's talk
Okay.
a little bit. So, where were some of? So, I know you lived in Japan. Tell me some of the places you lived.
Some of the places I've lived.
Some of
I
the
lived
highlights.
in
You don't have to go
Italy.
through everyone because I know it's too many
No,
to
no,
even
no,
remember.
no. I married a Jewish midshipman.
Right.
I graduated college on a Thursday. He graduated Friday morning at 10 o'clock. I pinned his shoulder boards on him at 12 noon after the graduation, and at 2 o'clock that afternoon we were married.
Really?
Yeah, the same day. And
Wow.
everyone, when I tell that to people, they think, you were married in the chapel of the Naval Academy? I said, oh my God, no. Because in front of the chapel, if I'd married there, there's this tremendous Tiffany window of Jesus Christ. So my father said, not there at all. You're marrying in the shul. And so I was married in the shul, and we had 8 ushers, and they were all Ed's classmates from the academy. And they saluted me going up to the pulpit, and then afterwards we came down, they saluted me again, and then they crossed swords outside because you couldn't use a sword in shul. And they crossed swords outside on the steps, and that was it.
I
And we
wonder why
were
they wouldn't
married.
let you use the sword in shul. I mean,
No.
was it just because it just seemed wrong, or I don't think there's any.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. You don't draw swords in a shul.
yeah. I guess so. I didn't know
Yeah.
that, but I
No.
guess so.
No. We had to wait to go outside. Normally it's done right there in the aisle, but no, it was there in there.
No, what's just funny is it's
Um,
not like there's a Jewish tradition like no sword drawing in shul. Like I've never, no one, like under what circumstance would that ever come up?
The
But
Rabbi Rosenblatt did not want the swords drawn in the
fair
shul,
enough.
so they were drawn outside. And the swords went up, and the rice they arched, made the arch with the swords, and everyone else threw rice at me. Almost every Jew in town was invited to the wedding.
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
that I
No,
mean,
it's
yeah,
just funny to think.
our social life in Annapolis was all Jewish, all Jewish.
I can
There was
imagine.
no intermingling.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
can totally imagine. No, it's just funny for me to imagine to think about like a section of the Talmud devoted to whether you can draw swords in a sanctuary or
yeah.
not. So wait, you
Anyway,
went.
so I lived in Italy, and I was very active in the synagogue there. Um,
What was that? Where in Italy? Naples?
Livorno,
Livorno.
which in English they say Leghorn, but if you take a cruise
Livorno.
or any, yeah, Livorno.
Yeah, yeah, I know Livorno.
Um, excuse me.
I know Livorno. It's also had a very large Sephardic Jewish population
Oh,
many years ago.
very, and I was very active with it. One thing I wanted to say about my childhood, okay? We lived above my father's theater. I lived in the black neighborhood above the theater, and I don't remember, but I know that when I turned 4, my father and mother sent me to nursery school on Duke of Gloucester Street. So I would get to know white children. And I mean, it was Miss Anthony's um, nursery school, which is now the vestry for St. Anne's Church now. And then I went from nursery school, I went on to kindergarten. Kindergarten was not part of the public school system yet. And I went to nursery school and then kindergarten there. And then I went to Annapolis Grammar School.
Wow.
So, but I took my lunch. They had a cafeteria there. I took my kosher lunch with me every day. And for Passover, I remember our maid coming to get me and walking me home for lunch because it had to be Pesach and took me back to school. Yeah.
That is a great story. That's a great
Yeah.
story. So
Yeah.
you remember the synagogue in Italy you were part of?
Yes. Yeah. Rabbi Toaf, he was the son of the Rabbi Toaf. His father was the rabbi in Rome,
Oh wow.
and this was his son,
Wow.
Rabbi Toaf.
So clearly this
I
was not
sent my daughter to Asilo, which was the Jewish kindergarten when we lived there.
and this was in 1962, you said? Is that what you said, or 65?
No. In '62, I lived in Japan. This is 1955.
55. Wow.
I got married in 50.
Wow. I mean, because
And in 55, we moved to Italy.
because you were in Italy really in the shadow of the Holocaust when you think about it. I mean, it was just
Exactly. I mean, the buildings were burned out. They treated us Americans marvelously because we saved them. We were the victors in World War II, so we were privileged to everything.
was there
We used to go to the chapel, the All Faiths Chapel. We were attached to an army base, even though my husband was a naval officer. But anyway, I'll tell you a story. So we get to Italy, and I don't live in quarters. That's not my way of living. I like to live in the communities, so I learn the culture of wherever we live, and the habits. So we went, but on Friday nights we went to the chapel for Friday night services. And when I first got to Italy, my husband asked me, join the Navy Wives Club. You have some identity with the military. So I joined the Navy Wives Club, and they're looking for a fundraiser. They had to raise money. And of course, that's my shtick, is fundraising. So I said, I have an idea. And I told him about having a calendar that you put on the wall. And in the bottom part of the calendar is the months and dates. But the top of the calendar, it folds. Top of it is all the advertisements, all the shops that we bought from, either in Livorno or in Florence. So if you cruise to and you want to take the Mediterranean cruise and you're going to Florence, your ship docks in Livorno. So anyway, so this is a fundraiser. It's a wonderful idea. Oh, they were thrilled. Now, who's going to make the calendar? Someone said to me, there's a business office in the local newspaper. So I said, oh, well, let me go over there and see what they can do. So I got to meet the head chief of the newspaper. He says, in his broken English and in my broken Italian, but my Italian was better than his English because I'd taken French and Latin and Spanish in school. So anyway, so we made do. Yes, so every Monday morning, I would go to him and show him the ads that we wanted in and how the calendar should be done. And this was going on from August, September, October, November. The beginning of December, Ed and I go to services, and we get a letter from the Jewish community inviting us to come to a Hanukkah party in the synagogue, or it wasn't the sanctuary, no. It was the entertainment hall,
right?
to come to enjoy Hanukkah with us. So I nudged my husband. I said, we're going. And so we went. And the interesting thing was the letter of invitation for us to come, it was signed by the gentleman that I am meeting with every Monday morning. His name was Gastone Arefische. Arefische. Then I thought about it. Are, that means gold. Fiche means smith. Goldsmith. He's your name. His name was Goldsmith, but his name in Italian was Arefische. So anyway, so we get our business done, and I'm saying to him, after we finish the business, I'm saying to him, I am Jewish. He says, see, I'm not getting through to him. I said, I am Jewish. He said, nice. I'm not getting through to him. So I took a pencil and I drew the Magen David. He said, Te Hebraic. You are Hebrew. Oh, well, that changed everything. We were landsmen. We were both Jewish. So I asked him to please come to our home for cocktails, and then together we would go to the Hanukkah party. He said, wonderful. See, nice. Oh, thrilled. So I write down my address for him. We lived next door to each other.
Oh my
And
God.
we didn't know it. We were both in apartment buildings. His apartment building was, I was 52 bis, which means 152 again, and he was 152. So we became like this. I mean, until this week. His wife just died. I mean, we were in contact all the time. Just this week,
Wait, is
Monday,
he still alive?
she died Monday.
Is he still alive though?
No.
His
He
wife was
went
still
on-
alive until this past week.
Yes,
I
yes. She was 1 month shy of 100. Yeah, I visited her 2 years ago. We went back to Italy a lot. They were the best 2 years of my life. I loved it. Loved being there.
Wait, look,
That is a whole nother story. I mean, he went on to become the head journalist in France for Radio Associates of Italy, and he became the head of the foreign correspondence. And when we visited them, I think in the we visited them many times, but this particular one, when he was head of the journalism department, it had to be 1984, something like that. He said, I hope you we got off the plane, we're visiting them. He said, I hope you brought a gown with you. I said, oh, I always travel with a gown. He said, oh, I'm serious. You're going to the Elysee Palace this evening. I said, yeah, and I'm going to meet Charles de Gaulle. He said, you're having dinner with Charles de Gaulle. And this was true. I fit into his wife's gown. I fit her long white kid gloves. I couldn't fit into her shoes. We rushed to Lafayette department store, bought a pair of black satin slippers, and I wore them. And we drove up to the Elysee Palace, took the red carpet in. He said, don't you say one word in English. Our relationship with France was not good at that time. De Gaulle did not like America. Anyway, we went to the palace, and we went through the receiving line. He said, enchanté, and I said, piacere. That's the same thing. I spoke Italian all that evening. The only thing that was American about that evening was they were selling cigarettes. Not selling, they were giving cigarettes. And the cigarette girl was, looked very cute with her tray in front of her. There were Camels, Lucky Strikes, those kinds of cigarettes. And he sat, there were 40 of us there. There were 5 tables, and there were 8 at each table. So that was 40 people. His table was roped off in gold rope, and he had a taster that tasted everything before he tasted it, so that he wouldn't be poisoned.
Oh my God.
Yeah. It was quite an experience. Yeah.
That is quite an experience. Wait, I've been holding this question back because, I didn't want to interrupt you. Your story is amazing. But tell me something. What was it like in Italy as a Jew? I mean, was there any remnant of the Holocaust? I mean, I know you said that there were burned out buildings. Was there a sense of anti-Semitism there at all, or did you not feel that?
No, I did not find anti-Semitism. No, I'll tell you when I found anti-Semitism. When I was when I decided to marry my husband, okay, I said, because I had lots of anti-Semitism growing up in Annapolis, lots of it.
Right.
Stones thrown at me, shouts, Hitler should have killed you too.
Ugh.
I mean, I lived at number 10 on Murray Avenue. Number 9, his daughter was not allowed to walk to school with me. Uh, I had lots of anti-Semitism. And let me get back to, no, in Italy, I never felt it. France, I felt it, but not in Italy. Um, I lost my train of
I
thought.
just asked you
But
about.
India. Oh, so my husband. So I'm going to marry Ed. I said to him, "With your 4 years, Ed was in the army, and Ed loved the military.
Well, he was
He
in the
tried
army or
for
he was in the Navy.
My husband loved the army.
Oh,
He was drafted into the army. He was served in the army as a sergeant. He wanted to go to West Point. He applied for a scholar. He applied to enter West Point. There are 3 ways you get into the Naval Academy: either a presidential appointment, which would be my son, the children of naval officers. That's a presidential, or through the military. Um, you can apply for it, and he was applied. And the third way, I forgot. Oh, a congressional appointment. So Ed tried for a congressional appointment, and his congressman gave it to him, and he came out the highest. He did a competition, academics. He came out the highest. He went for his physical. He could not pass the physical. His eyes were not strong enough.
wow.
So he was back in the army. Went back into the army. Waited another year. Tried again. Came out the highest. Went for his physical. And he passed everything except the last part of it was the eye doctor, the ophthalmologist. And his name was something like Goldsmith or Greenberg.
That's
It was a
right.
Jewish name. And he said to my husband, "Do you really want to go into the service?" He said, "I really do." He said, "Okay." And he passed Ed. So being Jewish helped him.
It does.
And so he went into the Naval Academy. And when I decided to marry him, I asked him, "How much anti-Semitism did you find in the military?" He said, "None. The academy was wonderful. Every man was judged for himself and his talents." Okay, that's good. I don't have to have anti-Semitism. Our first tour of duty is in Newport, Rhode Island. He's attached to a destroyer. The destroyer leaves for 4 or 5 months. And he said to me, "Stay here, don't go home. Stay here with the other wives, and you'll get to know the military and the Navy wives, another way of life." I said, "Okay." The first Monday after this was January the 3rd. It was on a Friday. The next Monday morning, the captain's wife, Mrs. Ailes, invites all the wardroom wives for breakfast except me. Okay, the first one, I'm suspecting something. The second Monday morning, everyone's invited except me. So I went to the executive office wife, and I said to her, "This Mrs. Ailes, she's having these breakfasts Monday mornings," and she said, "Yes." I said, "But I'm not invited." And she shakes her head. And I said, "Mary, am I not invited because I'm Jewish?" She said, "You answered your own question." I said, "Okay, I'm used to anti-Semitism." So I went home and I went with my parents and I went to Florida for the winter. It was okay, didn't
Yeah,
it? But I was
at
used to
least you
that.
got to do
There
that.
were
But
there was no telephones, there was no emails. When I came back, when Ed came back in May, and I went back up to be with him, of course, I told him what had happened. And Ed said to me, "You're going to have to learn to live with that." I have. So I said, "Okay." So I wouldn't live in quarters. I only lived in quarters when we lived in Japan because the Japanese were not friendly, nice people. There were demonstrations all the time. So anyway, so I always lived in the communities and I always joined the synagogues.
yeah,
And I had I had a wonderful life.
tell me about Japan a little bit. What was Jewish life in Japan like?
I met your father in Japan.
Yokosuka.
I was in Yokosuka, and we had Rabbi Morton Arrow, who was conservative from Philadelphia, and we became very close, very close. His wife had a miscarriage. She lived with me in my quarters when she had the miscarriage. I had a mother dying of cancer in the United States. Um, the doctor often, I had to come home 7 times because mother was near death and she'd recuperate. Mother was near death and she would recuperate. And I didn't want to go to Japan. I wanted to stay home with mother. She said, no, you go there because I'm going to come visit you there. So it was something for her to live for. It was psychologically, it was the best thing to do.
And did your
And she
mom
did
ever
come.
visit you? Did your mom visit
She
you?
came.
Good.
She came. She came and had Passover with me.
Oh.
When we were in Italy, mother came for about a month or so. She was having such a good time. She stayed 6 months.
Oh.
She helped me make a Seder for 150 enlisted men. I
Wow.
made Seder in 1956 for 150 enlisted men for the first Seder, and about 70, 75 came for the second Seder. It was strictly kosher. It was all remnants of the Second World War. We got our chickens from kosher chickens from Scandinavia. We got the matzah meal from Rome. We got the matzah from Israel, from everywhere. And reparations. We use all kosher. Well, they had never been used. China silverware was all from the German armies that they never got to use.
Wow.
It was quite and my husband, of course, conducted the Seder.
Wow.
I've had wonderful Jewish experiences.
Yeah,
Wonderful.
And so what was in Yokosuka though? What was it like? Was it? I mean, all anything Jewish was happening on the base. I'm sure, right?
Well, there was a chapel, All Faiths Chapel, and that's when Rabbi
Arrow.
Morton
Yeah.
Arrow. That's what and we became so close because I was having this very ill mother, and his wife had giving birth, had a dead baby. The first child was stillborn. His tragedies and my anxieties, we bonded very well. In fact, when my daughter got married, anyway, so he got out of the service, but before he left, he wanted a conference of all the chaplains in the Pacific. And that's when I met your father. Your father was a chaplain in Hawaii.
He was in Yokosuka. He was also, I think he was in the Philippines for a short while. Also.
Maybe it was the Philippines. I thought it was Hawaii. It could have been the Philippines. He wasn't in Yokosuka at the same time.
Right.
Anyway, that was it.
He was in Yokosuka in 1965, 66, and 67.
This would have been 1963.
Wow.
I think it's 63. Yeah. I have to know the year and now. Where was I living then?
Right.
I know that the Navy also sent my husband to Harvard Business School, and he graduated the B school in 61. We went to Japan from there, 61. So I was in Japan 61, 62, 63, and I think it was 63 that I did this conference.
Wow. Tell me, let's switch gears for a minute. Tell me about your connection with Israel. My father was
in charge of United Jewish Appeal. My mother was president of the sisterhood. It was called the Auxiliary then. We were very Jewish, very Jewish. And when I was in the military, I knew how important Israel was to Jews. I'm trying to remember. We were stationed, I think, mother was in charge. She was president of the National Council of Jewish Women, not Hadassah, the Ladies Auxiliary. Judaism was always very much a part of our family. And when I can't think where I lived, when I got very involved in Hadassah. So much so that I even got I'm still in the national board. Right. I'm honorary now, I'm so old. But I went to Israel. It was 69, after the 67 war, that Ed and I took the children over the Christmas holidays. and we took them on not an El Al, name an airline.
TWA.
TWA. We went on a TWA tour of this new state of Israel, but not as Jews, just to see what Israel meant to other people. We walked the Stations of the Cross. Bethlehem. We were in Bethlehem for the birth of Jesus on Christmas Eve. We did the Church of the Holy Sepulchre on Christmas Day. We did everything to find out why Israel was so important to so many people. It was a wonderful. From then on, all of my trips to Israel were. My daughter did her 3rd year of college with Brandeis in Israel. Israel has always played a part in our lives.
So 1967 was the first time you'd ever been, or 69 was the first time you'd ever been there?
Yes.
And how many times do you think you've been since?
Oh, many.
Right.
I mean, I'm national board. We were there twice a year for meetings. So until it was the 80s. The 80s, I was president of the Northern Seaboard, Hadassah. And then from being president of that, you go on the national board. And then I stayed on the national board till about 20 years ago. And then I became honorary.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite place in
And
Israel?
I was the only person on the national board that had no relatives that died in the Holocaust. I had no relatives living in Israel.
Right.
If I did, I didn't know about it.
Right. Do you have any particular favorite locations in Israel that
Oh, Jerusalem.
You like
of
Jerusalem?
course. King David Hotel, Jerusalem. That was it. Yeah.
There's nothing quite like sitting on that outdoor patio overlooking the
Oh,
swimming pool
God,
in the,
yes,
in the old city, right? And having like tea on the outdoor, Shabbat tea on the
it was
outdoor patio.
wonderful. Yeah.
It's magical.
Ed retired from the military, and before he went on to his second career, Ed and I did a trip around the world. And I remember we went from here to Los Angeles to Hawaii to China to Moscow. And we left the tour for a while in Moscow and went to Israel just to feel good about it. We did that when I came back and joined the group in Moscow, then went to Scandinavia, to London, home.
That is
And I had to have, and that was Moscow. It was still the Soviet Union, and China had become communist. So for the first time, we had to get a new passport. Couldn't use our military passport, so we had to get civilian passports to go.
Wow, right. I mean,
We were
going
watched
to the
the whole
Soviet
time.
Union was not something you could just do either. It was like you needed
Oh no, we
approvals and all this kind of stuff. So it's a big deal.
right. When we left Moscow, we went to what's the name? They've changed the name of it so many times.
St. Petersburg, Leningrad.
Yeah, Leningrad. And from Leningrad, we took a train to Helsinki. To leave there, we were put in a compartment, taped around, so we could not get out of that compartment until we got into Finland, and then they ripped the tapes off and said, "You're free again." We were watched the whole time. We were in Russia, watched constantly.
Oh my God, that's crazy.
It was romantic. It was dangerous, and it was romantic. And we were Americans, and we knew nothing. We're very bravado. Nothing's going to happen to us.
Right.
We're pioneers.
Yeah, I totally understand. Let me ask you one more question, and then
Yes.
and I just want to flip it from the past to the present. Tell me about your minus Temple Beth Shalom. You're welcome to talk about it, but really what I was thinking about is what's your home like now Jewishly? Do you still do Jewish stuff in your home? Do you still have
Well, let me say this. I live alone. My husband passed away over 16 years ago.
I know.
My children do not live in Annapolis. But on Friday nights, we Zoom and we do the Kiddush and the Hamotzi. We do that, and we talk a little, what we did during the week, and that's our visit together. So that is.
Yep.
That's it. In 1983, a group of women came to Annapolis and wanted to start a Brandeis Women's Committee chapter here, and they knew to be in touch with me. So I started a chapter here. It dissolved about 20 years later, but so I became very involved with Brandeis because I'd sent my daughter through Brandeis to Israel. So I was very busy with Brandeis. I'm still busy with Hadassah. We're part of the Greater Washington chapter now. Of all of my activities in Annapolis, and we haven't spoken about them, but they all know I'm Jewish. I let it be known I'm Jewish. I was the first Jew on the Annapolis Symphony Board. I was the first Jew on Historic Annapolis Board. I was the first Jew for a lot of things. And since then, I made sure there are other Jews got on the boards with me.
Yeah, I mean, the fact is that in many ways, because you have played such a prominent role in Annapolis, that you really did kind of normalize Jews being part of civic life here in Annapolis because you played such a prominent role. It became like, oh yeah, of course, that's people do that because Anna
You
Greenberg.
couldn't get away. My name's Anna Greenberg.
That's right.
You couldn't get more Jewish than that.
No,
and I'm proud of it. I remember once I asked my husband when we were still in the military early on, and I said, "How about changing our name from Greenberg to Green?" He said to me, "Anna, I got into the Naval Academy with the name Greenberg, and I'm not changing it." I said, "Okay." That was it.
It's
My maiden name was Eisenstein.
That's right.
And when President Eisenhower got to be president, I didn't have to spell my name for people anymore. Eisenhower, so it's Eisenstein.
That's right. It was easier.
Yeah.
Everyone knew it now. You again
Yes.
normalized.
Yes.
It's your story is you've got so many.
Yes.
And I realize I tried to kind of keep our conversation on the Jewish stuff and not on the secular stuff, which your story.
Yeah, but mine's very mixed. I mean, I was born and raised very, very Jewish. I mean, our maid tore our toilet paper for us before the Shabbat.
Oh my God!
You don't tear on Shabbat.
No, I know.
Yeah, I mean, I know all the habits. Yeah, or the restrictions, I should say.
That's something else. It's
yeah.
Do you feel as if that your kids have a connection to Judaism, that you've instilled a really strong, or at least a sense of Jewish spirit and Jewish connection to your children also?
My daughter does.
Yeah.
My daughter does. My son, no. He's a marvelous human being. Ethically, you can't find a more perfect man than my son. But religiously,
it's not everybody's cup of tea.
He started out as a nurse. He's now the head of the Maryland League for People with Disabilities. But I remember when he was nursing, he said, "There can't be a God in heaven. I'm seeing too much."
Right. It can be.
So he's questioned it all along.
I can understand.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what, Anna, this has been absolutely delightful. I can't tell you how appreciative I am of you sharing your story with me. You should know that, again, this has been recorded, and so we'll have this in a library. With your permission, I'm going to let people watch it too. Is it okay if people watch this? Hopefully, it's okay with you.
Of course. I wouldn't have agreed to
on like our YouTube channel, and people can see it.
Ari, if you think it's worthwhile, then I agree.
It's worthwhile.
I respect you.
It's totally worthwhile, I assure you.
Okay.
So I'm going to stop the record. So thank you, everyone who watched.
Thank you.